All right, let's get started. Welcome to our next video lecture series. We're going to talk about the biology of sex over three different uh, videos, and those are going to cover some definitions first, and then we'll talk about molecular biology and kind of the molecular determination of sex, the mechanisms there, and then finally the evolution of sexual reproduction, why we have different sexes at all. So we're going to get into some pretty detailed, some pretty advanced biology, but we're going to try to keep it accessible and fun so you understand what's going on. Really, really good stuff. So some cool questions to think about as you work your way through this stuff. You pull out your notebook and jot some ideas down. How can sex be non-binary? Certainly the standard that we have in the United States is that and some people are very vocal about this, where they believe that there's only two sexes, there's male and there's female, that's it. But in fact, we are going to see, and I'm going to show you that biology is not so bipolar. In fact, we have a continuum of sex. Do we need to really have, why do we have sexes at all? And so that's a valid question and something that's fun to think about before you know too much biology about it. It's like, why do we need to have two different sexes? Like, why can't an individual of a species just reproduce with any other individual of the species? Why have sexual reproduction at all? These are great questions. Finally, what is the reason there are only two? Right? Why have just two extremes? Why not have 4 or 5 different kinds of mating types out there, and that you can just mix it up however you like? So we're going to go into that a little bit, and hopefully we will learn as we go. So ultimately, there's going to be a historical version of sex determination. And if you think back to our lecture on science and how the model of our reality continues to be refined and evolves. Yes, at one time, we really thought that it was just these X and Y chromosomes that were either XX or XY, and that was it. But we really refined that to a great extent as we understand molecular biology better. And so what we'll do is dive into a much more current understanding of sex determination in humans. We're also going to talk then about how evolution drives the development of different gametes, right? So why we have sperm and egg, and then ultimately why we have different strategies that have evolved across different species to maximize the persistence of their DNA over generations. And ultimately, that is a fancy way of saying that the whole point of life is making more of your DNA. Like, that is really ultimately what your DNA or any type of DNA on this planet is trying to do, is make copies of itself. That's what it's programmed to do. Okay. So let's go over some definitions. Again, if you've had some biology background, this will be good review. If not, just hang with me. Again, there's no tests or quizzes here, but if you've heard these words before and can kind of have a general idea of what we're talking about, it certainly will help. So start with chromosome. And the simplest definition of a chromosome is it's just a big piece of DNA with genes on it. Okay. So we're going to talk about the fact that humans have 46 chromosomes, and 44 of those chromosomes are called autosomes. The other 2 are called sex chromosomes. And that's what we think about when we think about the X chromosome or the Y chromosome. We're talking about those sex chromosomes. And we'll get to why they're called sex chromosomes in just a bit. But ultimately, they're going to initiate the process of development towards a male or a female phenotype. Phenotype is further down the list. We'll jump to that. It's the physical manifestation of the information in your genes. So it's who you are. On my phenotype is I got brown hair, I got brown eyes, currently wearing a beard. That's my phenotype. It's the physical stuff that makes up an organism, right? And the information that encodes for that stuff is in your DNA. Now, the other thing that's interesting, and this is the only point to bring this up is because we produce sexually, we are diploid organisms, right? So you have 2 copies of every type of chromosome that you have. So we can say that you have 46 chromosomes, 44 autosomes, and which means you have 22 different types of autosomes. There's chromosome 1, you've got 2 copies of it, all the way through chromosome 22, 2 copies of each. One of those copies came from your mom, 1 came from your dad. 1 came from one parent, 1 came from another parent, right? So the genotype that you possess then is the combination of your 2 parents, and that's all of your DNA collectively, right? Now, finally, we have a fancy word for sperm and egg, and that's called a gamete. So that is a specialized cell for sexual reproduction, and it's only got 1 copy of each of those chromosomes. And that's the whole point of sexual reproduction. If I've got 46, I get to hand off half my DNA, and my partner gets to hand off half of their DNA, and now we're back up to 46 chromosomes in the next generation. If we didn't do it that way, we'd have problems because we would double the amount of DNA in our children every generation, and that's unsustainable, right? So again, this is a great slide to come back to anytime you're thinking about like, what, I just need a refresher on some vocab. These are some fundamental terms that will help you. Okay? Now, this idea of male or female really is a historic artifact, right? So yes, when you look at populations, the majority of people in the human species fall towards one end of two poles, one end being what we think of as the archetype male and the archetype female. And because of that, what we've kind of pushed and trained our physicians and people in general to do is that when a baby's born, we look at their genitals and say, oh, male or female, right? Pull out the baby, it's a boy, it's a girl, one or the other. They've only gotten two choices. When in reality, there we see very often somewhere in between. So this is a diagram from a great book. It's called Between XX and XY, Intersexuality and the Myth of Two Sexes. And it's written by an OBGYN, a doctor who delivers babies. And he talks about these are some of the diagrams that he learned on, right? So he says, if you're not penis or vagina, then you're somewhere in between. And then that has historically been deemed as something to be fixed, okay? Which in reality, it's not natural to fix that, right? So, or there's nothing to be fixed, like that's what it is, and there's a spectrum there. Now, again, granted, the majority of people fall towards one end or the other, but we have plenty of people in between. Now, again, linking the development of male or female genitalia with an XY or an X chromosome has something that has occurred historically as well. And that is when we had noticed that most females are XX and most what we consider males are XY. The reason for that, which we'll get into in a second, is the Y chromosome has like the first switch in a whole series of genes that turn on the pathway that goes to male. The default is female. So if you're XX, you're female. But what we're ultimately, the argument we're going to make is that there are many, many, many points of control along the developmental pathway for sex. And any one of those can go differently, not awry, just differently, to different extents. And there are many, what we think of as phenotypically, again, that's the manifestation, phenotypically female individuals out there who have chromosomes that are X and Y, right? And there are phenotypic males, what we think of as male out there, who are XX, right? So you don't know, right? But again, where has that come from? We're going to get to that when we get to the molecular biology of things. But for now, we want to think about the fact that we've really got a spectrum, right? We've got male on one end of the spectrum and female on the other end, and we have plenty of things in between, right? It truly is from one end to the other, and it's probably one of the rarest individuals that is like truly the perfect male or the perfect female, right? Because that's not the way nature works, right? It's always driving towards diversity. It's always driving towards exploring new options, right? That's the beauty of evolution, and we will talk about that more later as well, all right? So that's our quick intro. I'm going to start a new video for our second topic and dive into the molecular biology of sexual development.